Hello, everyone. This is another video in our coronavirus series. It's interesting how investor sentiment changes, and it changes so quickly. This morning, as our investor relations manager, Combe, was talking with investors, the questions that they're asking they all appear to be related to recessions. And none of these investors were thinking that 1 week ago. As the US has gone from 50 cases to 600 cases, it's becoming obvious to investors that there could be a recession that this black swan event, the coronavirus scare, could cause. And so the question that we've been asked many times already today is, hey, how did multifamily do versus single family in 2008? How does it perform? Because most of our projects are multifamily projects. Well, here it is right in front of you. So let's take a look at how multifamily did in the last recession. So what we're looking at is Freddie Mac's serious delinquency rate graph, and it's comparing multifamily versus single family. So this line that you see here is single family, and this line here is multifamily. Here's the things that you need to know. Number one, even in normal times, let's say 2005, the delinquency rate for apartments is nowhere near the delinquency rates of, let's say, single family homes. So here you've got a 1% delinquency rate in 2005, and here you've got something that might be like a 1/8% or 1/16% in terms of delinquency rates on the multifamily side. The second thing to note is that as the rate for single family started clicking up towards the last recession, we saw no impact in multifamily. In fact, even in 2008, the multifamily delinquency rate was absolutely flat, as close to zero as you can possibly get. And then when we started seeing this massive uptick in single family, where we went from 1% to 4%, so it quadrupled, well, then finally a year later, in 2009, we started seeing an uptick. And it reached its peak in 2011, not because these multifamilies were not doing well, not because they were not occupied, but because credit was not very available during that time, something that we don't expect to be replicated in the next recession due to something known as quantitative easing that the Fed is very much more aggressive on. So even at its peak, though, you notice that this number is roughly 1/4 of all multifamily loans were in default, where at the same time, roughly 3.5% of single family loans were in default. So if you think about that, the rate of default of multifamily was not even 1/20th of the rate of default of single family. And you notice also that as these peaks declined after the recession, by 2015, single family was still at 2%. So it was double its original rate here of about 1%, 5 years after the recession ended. Whereas you notice that by 2015, multifamily default rates had declined back to their extremely low historical level of 0.1, 0.2, or 0.3%. Why? Because this is a resilient class. Now, what happens during a recession is that people lose single-family homes. So you see all of these people that are losing their single-family homes. A significant portion of them end up in multifamily. Now, typically, this is not a good time for multifamilies because people in the multifamily will also leave and go live with mom in mom's basement, or will live in their car, or live in a mobile home park or a trailer park. So we do lose people, but if you look at historical occupancy, it really doesn't get affected much for apartments. So not saying that apartments will do better in a recession. That's not the case. In fact, our cash flow does tend to shrink. But when we compare it to what happens on the single family side, those kinds of bloodbaths are very rare in apartments because you need a roof over your head even during a recession.